I've never said this out loud. Not to my friends. Not even to a therapist. But after what happened that weekend, I can't keep it buried anymore. People talk about grief like it ends after the funeral, after the casseroles stop coming, after the sympathy cards stop arriving. But grief lingers. And when the house fell silent after my husband died, the only other heartbeat left was his son's. My stepson. I tried to treat him like family. But what he said to me, what I started to feel, that was something no son should ever say. It was Caleb who suggested the trip. I found this place, he said one morning over breakfast. It's small, quiet, you could use a break. I stared at him. You think I need a vacation? He didn't smile, didn't joke, he just nodded. Maybe we both do. I wanted to say no. I wanted to cling to routine, to grief, to the safety of silence. But something about the way he asked, gentle, steady, made it impossible to refuse. So we went. Just 2 days, a small rental cottage by the beach, not far from where his father used to fish when he was young. The kind of place where time moves slower, and the ocean drowns out everything you're too afraid to say. He drove, I packed too much. And we barely spoke on the way there. But when we arrived, something shifted. He opened the car door for me, carried my bag inside without asking, turned on the little fan by the window so I wouldn't sweat. It was thoughtful, familiar, and strange. That first evening, we walked along the shoreline. The breeze was soft, and the sun was falling low. I took off my shoes, let the waves reach my ankles. He stayed a few feet behind me, quiet. When I turned to look at him, he was already looking at me. And for the first time, I didn't look away. That night, we ate dinner in silence, closer than usual. Nothing happened. Not really. But everything felt different. The kind of different that makes your chest tighten, even when no one says a word. The next morning, I woke up early. Habit, I suppose. Years of making breakfast for someone who would never eat it again. The cottage was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're trespassing. I tiptoed down the hall, barefoot, still in my nightshirt. I didn't mean to open the door. I thought it was the linen closet. It wasn't. I caught a glimpse, just a second, before he shouted, "Wait." But it was too late. He was standing near the window, shirtless, towel low around his waist, sun from the blinds casting long stripes across his back. I gasped, slammed the door shut. My heart thudded in my throat, my face flushed, hot and guilty. From behind the door, I heard him say softly, "It's okay, I should have locked it." I didn't answer, I just stood there, frozen, palms against the cool wood, not knowing whether to laugh, cry, or apologize. He never brought it up. Not during breakfast, not during the drive to the nearby market, not when we sat on the porch watching seagulls fight over crusts of bread. But everything was different. The space between us had shifted, not wider, not closer, just charged. Like a thread had been pulled too tight, and now we were both pretending not to hear it strain. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying it, his startled eyes, the shape of his shoulders, the quiet way he said, "It's okay." And the worst part? It wasn't the sight I couldn't forget. It was the feeling. The feeling that, for the first time in months, I didn't feel dead inside. And that terrified me. That night, back in our too quiet house, I poured a glass of wine, maybe hoping it would dull the echo of my own heartbeat. I stood by the kitchen window, lights off, watching him take out the trash, just like always. But when he came back inside, he didn't go straight to his room. He paused, looked at me, and I didn't look away. "I meant it," he said softly. I blinked. Meant what? When I said, "I see you, not as my stepmother." He stepped closer, not enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the heat between us shift. I should have turned away, should have ended it there. But I didn't. My body froze. And God help me, a part of me leaned in. My hand gripped the counter. My pulse roared in my ears. His breath wasn't far. And for a moment, just a flicker of time, I didn't feel like a mother. Or a widow. I just felt alive. I pulled back first, whispered the only thing I could. "Go to bed, Caleb." But my voice cracked halfway. He didn't move. His eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for truth. And he saw it. That terrified me more than anything. Because in that moment, I knew the line wasn't just blurred. It was already broken. The next morning, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I brushed my teeth with the light off. I changed in the hallway. I avoided every surface that could reflect the woman I was becoming. I left the house early, claimed I needed groceries, though the fridge was full. Anything to not sit across from him at the table. When I came back, Caleb was in the garage fixing the leaky faucet. He didn't look up when I passed. Neither did I. But that night, I stood in the kitchen again, pouring the same glass of wine I hadn't finished the night before. I knew he was there, just down the hallway. I could feel his presence like static in the air. I hated myself for it. Not because anything had happened, but because something almost had. And worse, because part of me wanted it to. I thought of his breath near mine, the warmth, the gravity, the silence between us that had become a language of its own. I thought of what it meant to be seen. Truly seen. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's stepmother. Just as a woman who had been invisible for too long. And then I heard it, his door creaking open. Footsteps, not rushed, not hesitant. I held my breath. But he didn't come to me. He just left something on the counter. A folded letter, my name on the front. And then, he walked away. When my husband passed, everyone kept saying how strong I was. "Emma, you're handling this so well." I wasn't, I just got good at pretending. I went from being a wife to being a shadow in my own home. The house still smelled like his cologne. His slippers sat untouched by the bed. I didn't move them, I couldn't. And then there was Caleb, my stepson. He was 21, a senior in college, and practically a stranger living under the same roof. After the funeral, he moved back in to help me. But honestly, it felt like he was there out of obligation. We didn't talk much. He stayed in his room most of the time. I stayed in mine. At dinner, we exchanged polite words, nothing more. I didn't know how to be a mother to someone who wasn't mine. And he didn't seem to want one. So we danced around each other. Quiet, careful, distant. There were nights I'd hear him come home late, his footsteps heavy but cautious. I'd sit in the dark kitchen, pretending I wasn't waiting. Sometimes he'd pause in the doorway, like he wanted to say something, but he never did. And neither did I. What no one tells you about grief is that it doesn't always feel like sadness. Sometimes it feels like silence. Like a room full of things you can't throw away. Like sharing a house with someone who reminds you every day that the person you loved is gone. There's a strange kind of intimacy in silence. The kind that presses itself into your routines when words no longer know where to land. Caleb and I coexisted like two polite strangers. He'd cook sometimes, not for me, I told myself, just for survival. But he always made enough for two. Left the lid on, left a note. Food's warm, eat before it gets cold. I never wrote back, but I ate every bite. Sometimes, I'd wake up to find the trash already taken out, or the porch swept clean. Once, he quietly repaired the loose hinge on the laundry door. I didn't ask, he didn't tell me. And still, we barely spoke. I'd catch glimpses of him, shirtless after a workout. Earbuds in, sweat at his temples, just a boy, a man, a mixture of both. And I hated myself for noticing. One evening, he brought home a framed picture of his dad. No words, just placed it on the mantel like it had always been there. I stood there long after he went to bed, staring at it. I don't know why, but that night, I cried for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I found a cup of coffee waiting for me. No sugar, just how I like it. And a yellow sticky note. You don't have to say anything. Just know I see you. Something cracked in me. Not loud, not fast. Just a quiet shift. Something between resentment and recognition. The days blurred together after that. He kept bringing me coffee. Never said a word about it. Never sat down with me. Just left it there, on the kitchen counter. Like a ritual only he and I knew existed. I started waking up earlier. Just to catch him before he left. He always looked surprised to see me. But never annoyed. Just soft. Like he didn't expect anyone to show up for him either. Once, it was raining hard, and I heard the front door open just past midnight. I peeked out and saw him standing in the hallway, soaked, holding a plastic grocery bag. I asked, "Where were you?" He looked up like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "There was no more honey. You like honey with tea, right?" I didn't know what to say. He shrugged. Couldn't sleep anyway. I watched as he set the jar gently on the table and disappeared into his room. That night, I sat with my tea, hands trembling slightly, the sweetness hitting harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the honey. It was never about the honey. There's a moment, so small it barely registers, when you realize someone's paying attention. Really paying attention. Not out of duty, not out of pity. But because they want to. And in that moment, I felt it. The walls between us didn't come crashing down. They just thinned. I started noticing the things he never said. Like how he always left space between our chairs at the table. How he'd glance at me before opening the window, like asking silently if I was cold. And how, every time he said, "Good night," there was the slightest hesitation, like maybe he wanted to say something more. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was too lonely, too vulnerable, too desperate for warmth. But some part of me had already stopped pretending. Some part of me had already let him in. It took me hours to open it. I stared at it like it might explode, like reading it would mean admitting this wasn't just in my head. But I opened it, hands shaking. I know I crossed a line the moment I looked at you differently. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. But I can't lie to you, or myself. I care about you, not as a mother, not as a remnant of my father. But as someone I see. Every day, every hour, in ways I probably shouldn't. I'll never act unless you want me to. But if you feel it too, then maybe we're not lost. Just unspoken. I dropped the paper. My knees almost buckled. Because he had said what I couldn't. He had named the thing I tried so hard to keep unnamed. And now, I couldn't unknow it. That night, I sat at the table, wine untouched, my pulse drumming louder than the silence around me. I waited. I didn't know what for. But I waited. When he came home, I was still there. Same chair, same untouched glass, same confession spinning in my hands. He walked in quietly, like he was bracing for rejection. But I didn't reject him. "Did you read it?" he asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I'm sorry," he whispered, I didn't know how else to say it." "You shouldn't have said it," I replied. "But I'm glad you did." He looked at me then, not like a boy, not like a son. Like a man who had been holding something in too long. And I looked back. Not like a mother, not like a widow. Just a woman, stripped of pretense, of rules, of fear. I don't know what this is, I said, and I don't know if I can be the person you think I am. I don't think you're anyone but yourself, he said softly. And for once, that felt like enough. I didn't touch him. He didn't touch me. But that night, we sat across from each other longer than we ever had. Not in silence, but in recognition. Not as mother and son. Not as right and wrong. Just two people who had nowhere else to put their hearts. We didn't talk about it again. Not the letter. Not that night. Not the way I looked at him, or the way he looked back. Life resumed, in the way life always does when you don't know what else to do. He started leaving the house earlier. I started staying out later. And the quiet between us. It stopped feeling safe. I found the note again weeks later, folded beneath a stack of bills. I reread it. And for the first time, I let myself cry, not from guilt or confusion, but from relief. Because someone had seen the most complicated, fragile parts of me and hadn't run. Still, I don't know where we're headed. I don't know what this is, or what it can ever be. All I know is that something between us changed. And no amount of silence will make it disappear. People like to believe love fits neatly into boxes: wife, husband, parent, child. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when love shows up where it shouldn't, but feels more honest than anything you've ever known? I haven't told anyone this story. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I don't know how to explain a feeling that never had a name. So I'm asking you now. If you were me, and the only person who ever saw the real you was someone you were never supposed to love, what would you have done?